The following presentation features discussions of abuse, trauma, and survival, and may involve additional sensitive topics. Please trust your discretion while viewing or listening.
Hey, this is Dag, and you're listening to Beyond Trek Podcast.
Red alert.
Hello, everyone. This is Beyond Trek Podcast, and you're listening to Big J, along with hosts Dag, Renzo, and Suzanne. We have a special guest with us today from Star Trek: The Next Generation and The Big Bang Theory, Wil Wheaton. Yeah, golf clap.
Actor, podcast, activist, serious person on the internet.
Oh, very serious person. I mean, you
role model.
Yeah.
I don't know who this person you're talking about is, but I really want to meet him.
I know, right? Well, we're going to talk to Wil about his upcoming book, Still Just a Geek, which is releasing on April 12th. So if you haven't yet, please get your copy. So we're going to get right down to it with Wil. Now, each of our co-hosts are going to have their own sort of one-on-one time to talk with Wil and ask questions. So, Wil, ready to get right back into it?
Let's do it.
All right, great. Well, I'm going to start off. And early in your book, you talked about parental pressure in regards to acting from your mother. Your path in life was set for you, which is something that I can relate to when it came to my parents in sports. A guy my size, you're playing sports, that's just your path. So while growing up, did you feel that you were playing a character of yourself and not really you?
Yeah, I did. And the insidiousness of that and the real tragedy of that is that both of my parents, but especially my mother, gaslighted me and lied to me just totally, like utterly and completely lied to me, and spent my entire life telling me I wanted to be an actor. I wanted to go to work when I was 7 years old. When I said over and over and over again, please just let me be a kid and stop making me do all of this stuff, which was like getting picked up from school and going into Hollywood and sitting in an hour of traffic in two different directions and having to learn lines and then doing homework in the car and getting home when it was late and dark and I couldn't play with my friends. Like, it was so important to her that she had success in Hollywood. She didn't care if the way she achieved that success was through selling her kid. Like, that was all she cared about. And she lied to me about it my entire life and really made me believe that it's what I wanted to do. And my entire childhood, and I mean, and like well into my life into my 30s, there was a substantial percentage of my existence that was playing the role I thought I was meant to play. I had to do all of these things because it was what was going to keep my mom happy. She had put so much of her happiness into my hands and on my shoulders as a child. And then the man who was my father just never liked me and like really went out of his way to make sure I knew. And I think that as a consequence of both of those realities, I was like, as a little kid, well, Dad just doesn't like me and I don't know why. And nothing I do is good enough for him. But when I do this thing, it makes Mom really happy and she gives me all kinds of attention. And she's told me how important it is and how important it is for the family that I do all of this stuff. So maybe if I keep doing it, then Dad will love me. And that became the cycle of my life, which my mother really exploited and manipulated to just get me to be her thing. Until finally I was just like, I can't do this anymore.
Right on. And I totally get that feeling and relate to that. When it sounds like it's your idea is when you kind of buy into it. If it's someone else's idea, might not go with it, but if they make you think it's yours, it's a whole different thing. Which takes me to this part. I want to talk about chasing old glory. And I caught some of the hints of that in your book. Is it safe to assume that after Star Trek, you had this feeling of don't you know who I am? I'm Will Wheaton from Star Trek. And it was supposed to get you in the door. And how much of your life have you spent trying to get up to the top or back?
So it's actually very, very, very much the opposite of that.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. When I wrote Just a Geek, probably the biggest part of my identity was I was the kid who used to be on Star Trek. I had no current identity. In my private life, my current identity was I'm in love with Anne. We are married. We are raising children, and we're starting a family. That was my real identity. Mm-hmm. But it wasn't honored or seen or validated by either of my parents. And around that time in my life, I started to feel like I made a giant mistake when I left Star Trek as a teenager, because had I stayed in Star Trek, I would be successful. And if I were successful, my parents would treat me like a person instead of the way they're treating me now. So the entire thing of like, I used to be an actor and I used to be on Star Trek was never about give me special attention. It was never about let me into the room. It was never about let me cut the line. Even when I was legitimately famous as a teenager, even when I have been in places where I'm like situationally famous, like Comic-Con in the early 2010s, like I have absolutely rejected the entire notion of entitlement and treat me with special privileges because of these things that I do. That part of my identity was an enormous part of my identity. And it was it was hurtful and it was toxic and it was entirely self-imposed. And right. I just wasn't aware of it. And a lot of Still Just a Geek is about my reckoning with that and realizing that and choosing I am going to live my own life now, and I'm going to live the life that is important to me. I can see the outlines of that, sort of like the faint pencil lines of it in Just a Geek. But I wasn't really ready to say it out loud yet because I don't think I really knew it in my heart just yet.
So it's something that you eventually came to find out made life a lot better. And here's another thing that I think really improved your life, if I could say, and hopefully this topic is okay with you. So this is something that, if you recall, you and I talked about, I think it was last year, the year before, on GalaxyCon, on one of our previous video chats. It had to do with our alcohol and substance abuse as a way to escape the life that we were in. How much of this resurgence in your career today, or at least what you may see as the rise in your career and increased social media footprint, which is huge, how much of that would you credit to finding that sobriety?
All of it. Mm-hmm. It was January 9th, 2016 that I called my best friend and said, I know you've been sober for a really long time and I have a problem with alcohol and I need to stop. I am drinking for two primary reasons. The first reason, the one that I'm willing to admit to myself, is that I am trying to escape from all the pain and anxiety and sadness I feel. Yeah. The second thing I'm trying to do, which I absolutely will not admit to myself, is incredible amounts of self-harm. Just tremendous amounts of self-harm. I know this is bad for me. I know this is hurting me. And I think, I'm not entirely sure, I haven't discussed this with a psychologist. I don't know if it's correct or not, but I do remember being like 19 and deciding I'm going to smoke, like I'm cool and hip or whatever. Yeah. And I hated it. It was terrible. It tasted bad. It made me feel awful, but I knew it was really bad for me. I knew it was a really bad thing. And I knew, if mom knew about this, she'd be so upset. And in a way, by hurting myself, I thought I was hurting her. I thought I was striking back. I thought that I was kind of like giving back something, some of the crap that had been dumped on me. And I'm not an expert in this. I don't spend a lot of time thinking about it. And I know that there are people who struggle with self-harm. But that was absolutely a component of drinking. When I stopped drinking, a number of things happened. I suddenly had all this time for activities. I had all this energy. I didn't wake up every day feeling terrible. I didn't have to come up with a reason that I had a headache all day long.
God,
I didn't have to do any of that stuff.
I don't miss that at all.
Yeah, all of that was gone. And I lost a ton of weight that I had gained that was unhealthy. And I had to face the realities that I had run away from for my entire life. And I remember after I had been not drinking for like I don't know, between 6 months and a year, I guess. Where I am sitting right now, my house is this way. So like just off camera is my bedroom's behind me. My living room is off to my right, to your left.
To your right.
To my left,
Okay,
to my left, to my left is my game room, which used to be the garage. We converted it to the game room. I was out in the game room and I was playing video games. I don't remember what I was playing. Because what I was really doing was thinking about things that didn't feel good and thinking about trauma and things like that. And I walked into the house and I walked into the kitchen and I said to Anne was on the couch. We have a great room in our house. So like the kitchen and the living room are kind of separated by like basically an island. And I went into the kitchen, I think to refill some water. And Anne was sitting on the couch and I said, Anne, I don't know when it's going to happen, but I feel like I'm going to need to have a really big cry really soon, because I know that my dad doesn't love me. And I know that he never did. And it's the first time I ever said it out loud. I would not have been able to do that. And that if I had continued to drink, I just wouldn't have had the clarity. And I wouldn't have had the courage to really face that. I never would have had the strength to face it. And once that happened, it started this cascade, it was sort of like in your skeletal work. I just recently had a thing happen where I had a really severe seizure last summer. Oh. And as a consequence of it, it rotated one of my thoracic vertebrae. It was extraordinarily painful. Jeez. And for like 8 months, my back just constantly hurt. And a few weeks ago, I was laying down and I sat forward, and in the act of sitting forward, something happened and it moved back. It clicked back into place. I felt it. And over the next half an hour, I became aware of oh my God, there's been a ceremonial dagger between my shoulders for months. And I didn't realize how much it hurt. And then physically, all this other stuff started to happen. My arms stopped hurting. My hands stopped tingling. The places where nerves had been pinched let go, everything. Something similar to that happened emotionally when I was ready to confront the reality of an abusive, neglectful childhood where the man who was my dad resented me and my mother used me.
Will, thank you very much for sharing that. All the things you said, I've been through as well. And I've told my sponsor this, is that, how was I spending all that time drinking? I'm so busy right now. What happened? And he said, well, you weren't participating in life. You were waiting for it to be done so that you could escape. And for me, that's really what it was find a way to escape from the day-to-day that was happening there. So that's excellent that you found sobriety. That is great. I really look up to you on that part. And
thanks, buddy.
I think it's really special to have that kind of thing, that connection there. You and I have gone through a lot of similar life experiences. So
I'd like to add something, just sort of dovetail off something that you just said, because we have similar journeys. Yeah. We are kind of in similar places, but we've gone about it very different ways. A program didn't work for me. That just wasn't part of who I am. And I just want to say to anyone listening, there's someone listening to this right now who's like, man, I think it's time to stop. Right. Mm-hmm. So I want to say to that person, however you choose to be supported in your efforts to stop and continue to just say no. That's all we do, right? Ultimately, the decision is, no, thanks, I'm good. I'm not going to have a drink. Like, that's ultimately what we have to do.
The only thing you have to do,
it's hard.
Right.
Sounds right.
The only thing you have to do each day is not taking that drink. That's it.
Yeah. So for some people, having the support and the structure and everything that comes along with the program is vital and super supportive. And for some people, it isn't. I want to tell you, listener, viewer, whatever way you do it is super valid and really important. How it happens doesn't matter. That it happens does. What I was looking for was just a support system and somebody with some experience who could get me through that. And I happen to have a friend who's been sober for over a decade who also was like, I just really don't have I can't really be part of a group thing. It's just not how I'm wired. And that person was incredibly helpful and supportive of me. So I super honor your journey and I really respect everything you have done. And I just think it's really cool that we've both kind of gone on different but sort of parallel roads to arrive at this sort of like rest stop on the journey.
Right. Yeah. And that was a big deal for me. And that's why these guys were happy for it, because I told them, I said, to me, this started in 1987, Northgate Mall in Cincinnati, with these little chicken legs of mine and shorts that I should have been arrested for, really.
Dude, we all wore those shorts. What are you talking about?
We did. We don't want to admit it, but we all did. So, Will, I'm going to hand this off to Dag. He's going to be next to talk with you. So I'm going to sit back and listen.
Awesome.
Hey, Will, how you doing?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm doing okay. I want to say how wonderful it is that you've joined us today. You mentioned earlier, I think you said it was July 2016 that you made that phone call.
January
2016.
Yeah.
Well, there's a whole lot of like lines here that will cross. First of all, I just want to say, you're making the impact that I think you want to make on a lot of people. I'm one of those people.
Thanks.
I'm writing my own book. It's called An Angry Man, and it's basically just me talking about my life before 2016, when I had my awakening and got a lot of things coming to me. And when I was reading the preface to your book, the intro, and you were talking about there's a whole lot of stuff that I've done that I can't atone for, and you were describing these events, and I was just like, man, these are so many of the things today that I can vibe with. There's a lot of things that I know that I've done that I can't really take back, but I want you to know that you've contributed, at least personally, to me, and seeing the world in a way that is beyond the way I used to see it before. And so
that's awesome. Thank you.
I hope that helps. And I know there's a lot of men out there who probably feel the same way, a lot of people as well. But I'm only writing from my vantage point. And so I hope that other people can take from your book what I took away.
Me too.
Yeah. So that's the serious stuff, I guess. I'm gonna give my time to Renzo, because I think he has some really cool stuff there. But I just wanted to say that to you.
I appreciate that very much. Thank you.
Unexpected, but sure. Hey, Will. So as you can imagine, huge fan. I grew up admiring you and your characters as being like, that's kind of the approach I want to take to life, not knowing your struggles that were going on behind the scenes naturally. Now I've got a much better idea of what you were going through, and I can respect you even more as a result.
Thank you.
So first, I just wanted to say, I loved the way you used footnotes throughout the book, right?
Oh, thanks a lot.
Delightful. I found myself laughing my ass off at a few points of things. And as somebody with more than a bit of ADHD, I rabbit holed on some of your footnotes just to try and understand the content better, right? So
that's awesome.
that was a delight. So first, I want to start off with like a light question. What video games, tabletop games, what are you currently enjoying the hell out of? And is there anything on the horizon that you are like really interested in?
The pandemic wrecked tabletop gaming for me and my friends. It is only recently that we have even begun to talk about getting back together again, feeling that it's safe, feeling that we can be inside and play the way that we want to play. So I haven't been able to play at all. The last time I played a game was, I don't know, a month or so ago. I just played a few rounds of Sushi Go with a couple of friends in Ann because we were like, we gotta play a game. My friend owns a game shop in town, and I just went through and I like looked through all the kind of new releases that looked really great and bought through about 4 games. I haven't been able to even open them or play them yet, but they're definitely on the list. I am hopeful that we're not just between variants. I hope that actually we're on the downside of this and that getting together will be safe and awesome again, and then the gaming starts up all over again. In terms of video games, the majority of my time is going into 2 places right now. I have been playing the absolute hell out of the Donkey Kong arcade game.
Really?
I have
Classic.
Yes. I'm going to speak in extremely high level, highly specific Donkey Kong nerd language that I imagine maybe 0.5% of the audience is going to pay attention to and care about. But for anyone who plays Donkey Kong a lot and plays it the way I play it, I'm just trying to get to the kill screen, and I don't care about the score, and I am kind of getting stuck on the level 3 elevators. The level 4 elevators, where timing is a real issue. And because I'm playing the arcade version, I don't get to save a game state and just watch the bouncing jacks and pick it up again. Actually, I'm playing an arcade machine, so I have to start all the way from the beginning and go all the way back up to there. It's incredibly fun. It's incredibly satisfying for a ton of reasons, and it will very likely be part of the next book that I'm working on. The other thing that I'm doing a lot of is I'm playing NHL 22 on my PlayStation, and I'm playing through career mode. And I created a character called Blaine Gretzky. He is the mirror universe version of Wayne Gretzky. He has the goatee and everything, and he wears number 98. He was drafted first overall by the Seattle Kraken, and I'm playing through his career, and then I document his career on my Instagram stories. And Blaine Gretzky has probably 50 fans in the world, but they're crazy super fans, and I love them. I get messages from them. Evan Evagora, who plays Elnor on Star Trek Picard, is a massive Blaine Gretzky fan. He told me this when I saw him a couple of weeks ago, so now I try to tag him in Blaine Gretzky posts, and Blaine Gretzky dedicates wins and things and milestones to his number 1 fan, Evan Evagora. So Evan will never see this. I know he doesn't pay attention to me outside of when we do Ready Room things together, so I can tell you and he'll never find out. I'm going to make some Blaine Gretzky trading cards specifically so I can give one to Evan.
That's fantastic. It's good that you found like a good outlet for your gaming needs even in the midst of the pandemic, right? Because
it's been really fun.
I had literally just bought the entire Star Trek Adventures like board cube with all the books to try and like run a campaign at work, and then pandemic, and they're still in the box because there's been no way to sit down with 8 folks and play through something like that.
I really love that we have these ways to kind of play virtually, and I love that we have these ways to kind of play remotely. And my reality is that as someone who's turning 50, who's been gaming since I was like 11, that switchover is so weird to me, and so much of what I genuinely love about gaming is lost in that translation, that it just wasn't able to really recreate that space that still remains, that hasn't been like properly filled for a couple of years. But for everyone who is able to do that, I'm incredibly happy for you, and like a little envious.
No, I'm with you. So I started playing tabletop games in high school. A teacher got me into playing Rifts, right? And I tried playing Pathfinder and D&D and such online, and it's just not the same. I find my attention wavering. I get drawn to other things, and suddenly I feel like I'm half-assing it, and that's no fun for anyone. So
Yeah, I agree.
So switching to a more serious tone, in your book, on your Twitter, and a ton of other interviews, you've been very honest and upfront about your own personal struggles with depression, right?
Yeah.
You've talked about having had, to put it mildly, a challenging childhood, like you were talking about with Jay. A lot of people who struggled with similar things find that they get themselves into activism to try and like make the world a better place, right? As an outlet for that frustration, or they get themselves into gaming as an escapism. And I don't mean that in a negative way, right?
Sure.
Do you have any fond memories of times where either like your activism or video games like really helped you get past a heavy day or in a very tough emotional day? Like that January 2016, after you had that talk with Anne, did you like sit down and play like some Diablo 3 or something just to get your mind off things? Like anything like that?
It's not really, I understand the question. And it's just, that's not really how I work. What has been related to that, and the reason that the next book has so much to do with Donkey Kong, is that I have found that in certain games, especially 80s arcade games, and I'm thinking specifically of Donkey Kong, Mr. Do, Major Havoc, Tempest, those are the ones that I play the most. There's a rhythm to them. And there's a meditative, hypnotic quality to them when, as a player, I kind of fall into like that zone that you kind of got to be in, so that like my joystick moving happens to be in sync with the counter in the processor. So things are happening in a way that support each other and make it easy for me to kind of move through the game. While that's happening, an enormous part of my mind drifts off a little bit and starts working on ideas, starts working on story stuff. Or if there's like something that's been gnawing at the edges of my consciousness, something that is related to my mental health, something that is related to the trauma that I am still kind of working all the way through, I'll let my mind kind of drift a little bit and think about those things, while like this other part of my mind, like the active part of my mind, that kind of gets in between me and like whatever my goal is, it's so occupied trying not to lose on the game that the part of my brain that's like, okay, I love you and care about you, and I really want to work through this with you, right? That part of my brain gets an opportunity to kind of sit in the pilot seat for a while and drive the bus. And that's been unbelievably, like astonishingly helpful.
Yeah, I mean, you're focused on all these 80s arcade classics. It definitely makes more sense why you were so involved and so awesome in the Ready Player One audiobook recording, right? Like it makes sense now that you were passionate for it.
I just happen to be one of those Gen X men who did all the things Ernie talks about in that book. You know, there's a lot of us. It's just like, yeah, this is the stuff that we grew up with. This is the stuff that we love. And he wrote a story about all of those things. Yeah, I am so honored and so grateful that I get to be part of that. That's part of my legacy. I really love it. Yeah, that was just such a good time to do. I just came across a thing that Ernie sent me that I had completely forgotten about 1,000,000 years ago, 20 years ago. Ernie was a slam poet in Austin, and he recorded a bunch of his live shows, and he released a self-produced album called Ultraman as Airwolf. And I loved it. I was just blown away by it. And I submitted a link to it on fark.com in the early 2000s when so there's a moment where it feels like, and I talk about this in Still Just a Geek, there is this moment, and I don't know if this is objectively true or not. This is the way it felt to me. It felt like the whole internet was at that time, for the culture that I was in and for the things that I cared about, it was largely covered by Slash.Fark, Metafilter, Meme Pool, Dig didn't exist, Reddit didn't exist, Netscape News didn't exist. So if you can get noticed at Fark or Slashdot, you could really get noticed, and it would make a difference. Like, it was easy to stand out back then. It's much harder to do now. But I submitted that thing to Fark, and I was like, this is amazing, and this guy's incredible, and I think everyone will love it. The link was approved. Ernie immediately sold out of everything, had to make more, sold out of all of those, and then told me he remembered that I was the guy who submitted that link to FARC, and it was so successfully positively received. That was the last little bit of courage and nudge he needed to start writing Ready Player One.
Wow, that's amazing that you had such a foundational impact on like what is objectively a really good piece of fiction. So
it's just, I mean, listen, I'm not taking any credit for any of that at all. I'm just really glad that at a moment when Ernie was like, I just needed somebody to say, like, go do this, that I happened to be right there and I happened to say, yo, go do this.
Yeah,
hey,
it's
listen,
that little
like,
push.
Cool.
Yeah, the little push to help him get out the door.
Cool. Yeah. If it wasn't me, it would have been someone else. I'm thrilled that it was me.
I'm just going to comment and say that I'm way more inclined to buy an audiobook if it's read by you, because after Red Shirts and Ready Player One, like, call me an adherent, man. I dig it.
That's rad. I love that. Thank you very much. I love the part of my career that features audiobook narration. It's incredibly satisfying. It's a thing that I legitimately feel like I'm good at it. I feel like when I do it, it is special because I did it. And that's a weird thing for me because I spent my whole life kind of like being told directly and indirectly that actually everything I did sucked. And it's just, there were some people who were kind of fooled by it, and they would eventually see through me. And I kind of don't feel that way. I'm really proud of myself and I feel really grateful for it. And I feel good about all the hard work that I do. It's really, really great. And it makes me sad when I think about all the years, the decades I spent not allowing myself to enjoy that kind of feeling. It is possible to enjoy those feelings without walking around like you're the biggest fucking deal in the world. You know, there's like a huge difference between those things. I was not allowed to experience that difference as a kid. I had to discover it on my own. But thank you. You're very, very, very kind. It is an incredible privilege to narrate audiobooks. And because I'm all about the promo and the self-promo and the hustle, if you enjoy the audiobook of Still Just a Geek and you want to check out other things that I've narrated, I got two places for you to go. willwheaton.bandcamp.com, where I've done some independently produced audiobooks. And there's some weird kind of like loopy music that I fooled around with and made once. And also radiofreeburrito.com, which has about a decade's worth of infrequently updated podcasts of me telling you stories and reading you stories and playing weird music and just doing kind of bizarre late night radio stuff that I really, really like. So if you like my voice and you like the way that I do things, I have now successfully engaged in self-promotion. Thank you very much. Thanks for coming to my TED Talk.
Any self-promotion you got, it's perfect.
We'll include links at the bottom of the video, right? Yeah. Like we can happy to do it.
I'm on it.
All right. So switching slightly to your politics here, right? So you're super outspoken as a liberal, and so are the four of us, right? We've seen that many other Star Trek alum are as well. I'd love to know your thoughts as to the inclusion of Stacey Abrams in the Discovery finale. We saw your behind the scenes. Cool. Yeah, we saw your behind the scenes thing that was in the Ready Room. Really cool. Yeah. I'd love to know what you thought of that. Do you want more of that? Do you want a Bernie Sanders cameo? Because I know I do.
There's this wonderful story that Whoopi Goldberg tells about seeing Nichelle Nichols on the original Star Trek. Whoopi Goldberg being a black girl in the 60s, saying, I guess to her, one of her parents, look, one of us made it. One of us made it to the future. And I think about that all the time. I think about how that, like what that means. And that to me is kind of the foundational idic of Star Trek, that there is a place in the future for absolutely everyone. And Discovery has said, there is a place for trans people. There is a place for same-sex couples. There is a place for asexual people. There's just, the world is not separated into cisgendered heterosexual white men and other. Like, that's just not how the world is set up. As much as mediocre white men want to believe that's what the world is, it just isn't. And I love that Star Trek says that future that inspired Whoopi Goldberg, that made her want to be part of Star Trek, that we continue that. I love that Stacey Abrams, as the president of United Earth, that says, like, yes, as it turns out, in the future, the values that she has been supporting, the values that I believe she won the election for governor in Georgia with, are the values that actually matter to humanity. They're the right values. They're the values that win, right? We are seeing in this season of Star Trek Picard that there's a possible future. There's a Trumpy future. Like, it's
Very
scary as
Trumpy.
shit. You know, it's terrifying. Like, anyone who tells you, if anyone who argues sincerely that there is not a fascism problem in America is either lying or stupid. We have a huge fascism problem in America. We have a violent, angry, entitled white man problem in America. And one of the things Star Trek says is, like, that doesn't win. We eventually defeat that. And I love that.
And that's a common theme throughout all of Star Trek, right? Like, you see that in Enterprise with Terra Prime and them.
You see it in everything. And it's very clear that that's been just part of the fundamental philosophy and values of it. And because Star Trek's been around for 50 years, like, it really, it clearly has inspired an entire generation. And that's really that tells you the power of fiction, the power of art, the power of narrative. That's an entire other conversation that I could have for hours about what that's done and how that has existed throughout history, how art has moved culture throughout history. Stacey Abrams specifically, I had the incredible privilege to be in a Zoom thing with her during the election. And I got to exchange, I don't know, a half dozen words with her. And it was incredibly exciting just to know that, wow, Stacey Abrams is, like, talking to me. And she inspires the heck out of me. Like, I would love for her to run for president. I would love for it to have that opportunity. The thing that surprised me the most that I loved was what an amazing actor she is. I expect a certain degree of competence from politicians because they need to be communicators and they need to be able to like get a message across. But being a good communicator and being a good dramatic actor are two really different things. And she's super good at both of them. And I just didn't know that she had the acting tool in her toolbox. I would love to see her on Discovery in the future because it increases the odds that I get to interview her on Ready Room.
True.
And then I've also told, I have only half jokingly told the showrunners of every single iteration of Star Trek on the air right now, if you ever need someone who can travel through all of space and time and just show up whenever you need him for something and then leave, I know a guy and I'd be happy to make an introduction.
Well, I mean, that's the cameo many of fans have been asking for, right?
I want to see it.
He just stole the question I was going to ask.
So just because I exist in Star Trek and Stacey Abrams exists in Star Trek, there's a non-zero chance. I mean, it's like a 0.7,000 zeros and a 1% chance that we could be in the same place, but it's still non-zero.
Yeah,
non-zero.
Dag and I watched that same fundraiser you did for the Democratic Party. We loved the interactions. Stacey Abrams shows off her brilliance in it when she's handling even just like random Trek like quiz knowledge. She is brilliant, and it shows in like her interactions with folks. So I just want to say thank you for taking the time to answer my questions, and I'm going to hand you off to my co-host Suzanne.
Okay. Hi.
Thank you so much for speaking with me today.
It's such an incredible pleasure. I'm sure you've heard me say this a lot. I'm having an insanely wonderful time talking with all of you. I love doing this.
Glad. I'm very glad. I wanted to mention a couple of things before I get into questions, if you'll allow me. TNG was my first Trek. Awesome. My parents sat me down in front of TNG, I think, when I was 3 years old. And my first imaginary friend was Beverly Crusher.
Awesome. I love that.
I grew up really relating to Wesley a lot. And I also wanted to say thank you so much for your continued support of LGBT Trekkies as well. I saw your pin at Star Trek Day, and it means a lot. It means a lot to all of us, and it's very important. So thank you very much.
You're welcome. I can honestly say I wish it wasn't. I wish the LGBT community got that absolutely everywhere they went. I wish the identity and the experience and the choices made by a member of the LGBT community were validated exactly the same way every choice I make as a white dude, simply because I exist. And until that happens, I will use every piece of privilege I have to do everything I can to close that gap and just take away all this disgusting privilege that's handed to us that so many of my fellow white dudes do absolutely nothing with.
Thank you so much. That really does mean a lot. I did want to talk about a little bit about anxiety, because I also have anxiety. I have generalized anxiety. I also have ADHD and autism. So I'm comorbid. I have all, like... That's
a lot. You have a really interesting brain.
Yeah, I have a very strange brain. It's a lot. I wanted to talk about how that factors into your writing specifically, because I'm trying to write a book as well. And I find that my anxiety just to start something will often, I'll write 3 chapters in a day and then I'll hate it and throw it away and start over again. I wanted to ask if you had any techniques kind of to get around any anxiety that you feel, especially annotating this particular book, and if you had any advice for young storytellers.
Don't ever throw anything away. You can cut it. Cut it. Absolutely cut it. You're like, it doesn't work. Cut it. Great. Good choice. That's an affirmative choice. Awesome. Don't throw it away. Put it somewhere else. You've worked for a while on something. You have all this stuff. And you're like, this is garbage. It probably isn't. It's probably 10% away from being exactly what you want. But because we live in the super happy fun times brain club, our brain's like, aha, I told you shouldn't have started. Right. And you're like, OK, I'll listen to you. And you throw it all away.
Oh, yeah.
So never throw it all away. That's the first thing. Even if you're never going to look at it again, just put it in a folder on your desktop. Just stick it someplace. That's the first thing. The other thing is that I have had to learn, like, look, when we live with anxiety, it's not a thing we choose. It's not a thing we control. It's not it's just, well, shit, I got anxiety. Like, it's just kind of always there. I describe it as kind of like a swarm of bees around my head. Like, I can hear it. I can feel it. Sometimes it's just a lot of noise, right? And I'm just like, okay, it's just a lot of bees around my head. I can deal with that. Other times the bees are angry. And if I don't do everything the bees say, they're going to sting the fuck out of me. And that is what my experience with kind of generalized anxiety is like. I can go from everything is amazing to, well, shit, we're going to die, like that. And it makes absolutely no sense. What I've had to do, this is what works for me. And it might not work for you, but maybe give it a try. I have come to believe that a little anxiety is real helpful. Can be a real good thing, right? For example, we learn fire is hot, so we don't touch fire. So we have this little voice in our head that's like, yo, don't touch that fire. Thanks, voice. I appreciate that. As we get older and we live more life, we have those little voices that pop up from time to time. Yo, don't do that. That's a bad idea. Or, that thing made you feel bad, right? So sometimes we can get a little bit of an anxiety as a bit of a motivator and as a bit of an early warning system, right? It's just kind of in our heads. That's like, it can kind of motivate us and do that. There is a point where it stops being helpful and it becomes harmful. There's a point where the little friendly reminder to get on the thing has been received and has been acted on, and you don't need the anxiety anymore to stand over you and do this the whole time, Right. When I feel that happening, this has taken me a decade to learn to do. But when I feel that happening, I stop and I actually talk out loud to myself. Hearing it and saying it is real helpful for me. And I'll tell myself, like, I get it. I understand what you are doing. You are trying to help me. But this level of anxiety, it is not helpful. It is absolutely not helpful. And it's just kind of like, it's become a bit of a morass now. I can't always do it. But when I can make that separation, when I can identify it, it empowers me to make a choice to listen to the anxiety or not listen to the anxiety. It's still there, But I have found that if I stop listening to it, it just gets quieter and quieter until eventually either I don't notice it or it stops. I also had to realize that there's a part of my writing process where I decide that this is awful and it's terrible and I'm the worst person who's ever existed and I'm the worst writer. And here's Carrie's mom. They're all going to laugh at you. They're all going to laugh at you. And like everything is awful and I'm the worst and I'm going to throw this all away. After like the fourth time that happened, I realized, this is part of my creative process. This is how I know I'm almost done. When I get to that point, because it's that part of like, well, I'm going to have to let it go soon. And then the last thing for writers, write because you love it. Tell your story because you want to read it. Tell your story because you want your story to be in the world. And you have to be okay with that being the only reason the story is ever written. If someone else reads it, well, that's awesome. If someone wants to publish it, what? If someone wants to send you on a press tour and publish it and put it in the world, okay, right? But the whole reason, the whole motivation behind any art at all has got to be, I don't know, I really love this. And it nourishes a piece of my soul that isn't nourished by anything else. And then it is so essential that we separate whatever the end result is from the process of doing it. And that we just love the process of doing it. And then when it's done, we kind of got to let it go and move on to the next thing.
That's awesome.
And like, I mean, I don't know if that's helpful. I always feel like when I talk about the things that are helpful for me, I feel like Brad Jacobs on The Simpsons going, there's nothing tricky about it. It's just a little trick. And I feel like I oversimplify things, but I'm trying to reduce what has been like a decade of really complicated work into some really easy kind of like almost aphorisms that people can just ingest and then research and unpack in their own kind of way, right? Do the thing because you love it. Don't do it for another person. Do it because it's meaningful to you, because it brings you joy and it puts something into the world that you're really glad is there. And if it happens to be something that works into a professional or career or financial kind of thing, that's great. I love that. Cool. But you can't start thinking about that until you've done so much writing that you feel real comfortable saying, yeah, the next book's going to be about blah, blah, blah. I don't know really what it is, but I know it's going to be about blah, 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 and I'm going to do it. When I could do that, I knew, cool, I can commit to an idea and build out the idea. And that took all this pressure off of me to build the entire thing and have it perfect before I even ask if it's okay to do it.
That's awesome. No, thank you. That is really helpful. And I know it seems maybe oversimplified, but it is true that, I mean, you know, a lot, even just sharing what might help you could help a viewer, could help somebody think, oh, I never thought about it that way before. And I really appreciate it. I also wanted to say that the bees analogy, all of my friends will watch this and go, oh yeah, they say that all the time. That is how I view my brain. It's like they're in every direction. And sometimes they get a little closer and I don't know when it's going to happen. And I don't know where they're coming from.
Right.
But they're there. So I totally relate to the bees 100%.
I'm sorry that you relate to the bees, but also but I got to tell you in a way that's like kind of reassuring to me. I'm sorry that you experienced the bees, but thank you for sharing with me that you also experienced the bees. It really makes me feel a little just less weird.
Yeah, and this might also, you might also relate to this. I also have depression and the ADHD, and autism, all that. Sometimes there's elevator music too, and so I'm just like sort of apathetic. But there's like buzzing. But I also wanted to kind of go off of that and go into something that I watched that really, really touched me and meant a lot to me, and it was the video that you made for a newborn named Violet about why Violet. It's cool to be a nerd. As somebody with ADHD, I was very recently diagnosed. I didn't know I had ADHD until I was 18. And so I sort of had to relearn how to be a person and why people thought I was weird and why people thought that it was weird that I loved the things that I loved. And you said in it, you said that the thing that ties nerds together is the way that we love things and the way that we can find other people that love things the way that they do. With social media today and with younger generations that are also still dealing with that. I mean, I was called a nerd my whole life. I still get called a nerd. Clearly, I'm wearing a comm badge. So why do you think that is still relevant today? Why do you think that would still be relevant for people like me?
I think that we're all looking for community. We're all looking for our people. We're all looking for a place to call home. We're looking for a place where we're safe, where we feel supported and loved. And one of the reasons I told baby Violet, who is now not a baby, she's a person, she can talk. Baby Violet is old enough to have heard that and understood it by now. One of the reasons I told her that being a nerd is not about the thing you love, it's about the way you love it, was so that we would give each other space to be enthusiastic for the things that we love. I don't like football at all. I actually kind of dislike it for a ton of reasons, but I know that there are people who love football the exact same way that I love Deep Space Nine. And I know that they put on their football costume to go to a game the way I put on my Star Trek costume to go to a convention. We're doing the same thing. We're loving it in exactly the same way. It's just a different kind of thing, you know? One of the reasons I put that out there is so that idea, I wanted to plant that idea so it would take root everywhere. The more people who are just like, oh, you're a blah, blah nerd. I'm a blah, blah nerd. Like, cool. You know, we're nerds about these different things. Like, why are you a blah, blah, blah nerd? I'd love to know more about that. You know, those sorts of things. I think that one of the things that's real important about that is that people who are nerds for things are enthusiastic. We're enthusiastic about it. We love it. And we like, and our enjoyment of loving a thing is enhanced by sharing it with another person who enjoys it too. I don't know why. I don't know what it is, but there is that moment. Like when I was watching the finale of Star Trek Discovery, I watched all this stuff in some cases months before it's broadcast, entirely by myself in like the cone of silence in a Faraday cage so nobody can find out anything about it. Can I tell you how much I wanted to be able to turn to the person next to me and go, Stacey Abrams? Like, I didn't get to do that because I was watching it by myself. But for people who are like, oh, I love this, how cool to have that moment. That's why I think it's really important. And I think it's important that we nurture that community. And the community, the larger nerd community that exists as a consequence of our conventions where we gather, the giant ones like the Reed Pop conventions, and then the little tiny 700 people at one expo hall over the weekend comic book anime conventions. That's our Lambeau Field on Sunday. You know what I mean? Like that's our church. That's our rec room. That's our concert hall. That's just where we get together and do stuff. And it is so important that we who are currently kind of taking up that space, we have to protect it. We have to cultivate it. We have to nurture it. And this is really important. We're not gatekeeping it, and we're not keeping people out. We're keeping it healthy and thriving and flourishing so that kids who are future nerds, who may not even know they're nerds yet, will have a place to go when they need a place to go. And they will have the same place that we have. And also, being a nerd is great. Don't let anybody tell you being a nerd is not great. I know that when we were kids, it was pejorative, and it's just not anymore, which is why I open every episode of The Ready Room with, "What's up, nerds?" Because I'm like, what's up?
I love that.
Hey, we're hanging out. We're nerds together. It's awesome. I love it.
Absolutely.
Will, can you imagine how hard it was to play football and a Star Trek fan? That was rough. That was a long childhood.
And the thing is, now we have created a world where you go to football practice, and then after football practice, you go home and you play Smash together for a little while, and then you watch Star Trek or Firefly or Battlestar Galactica or Squid Game or whatever it is. That thing where like, Marge, in college, there are jocks and there are nerds, you know, like it just doesn't exist. We reject it. We meaning kind of the nerds have really rejected that. So the nerds who are sort of like the leaders now, who are raising the nerdlings, right, are like, yes, this is for everyone. This is for all of us. And it's better the more people are here. Like, in a lot of ways, I feel like it's not a zero-sum competition, right? But I do have to say that there are ways where I kind of feel like we won. Like, we just won in a really cool way. We won in a way that means everybody wins, right? It's like, we did manage to deflect the asteroid. Cool.
I had that experience watching Discovery Shasta this last week, and a bunch of Trekkie friends of mine got together, and at the end there was much screaming and crying. So it's happening everywhere.
Truly. I wanted to mention I was at the Picard premiere, which is the first premiere that I had ever been to. It was really cool. Yeah. And I couldn't talk about it. And it sucked because I couldn't talk about it with anybody except for maybe like a friend of mine, Heather, who had been. And so it was really hard not to talk about it. So I totally get that. But for me, it was only a week. I can't imagine waiting that long.
It is so like I'm so far ahead of the world on everything related to Star Trek, and I cannot talk about any of it at all.
That's rough, buddy. That's rough. So being ahead of everybody else.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Your thoughts and prayers are so welcomed and appreciated during this unbelievably challenging time. Thank you. Bless you all. I appreciate it. I feel it. I really, really do.
It's probably painful to hear all the fan theories and everything else.
You know what? I'll tell you that my absolute favorite thing is when a fan theory accidentally ends up being right, but they got there the wrong way. I love that. I'm crazy about that. It's so awesome. Fun. I read all of them, and I'm like, and then I'll read them and I'll think, oh, you're going to be so bummed out, or oh man, you're going to be so excited. Just all that stuff. I see it all the time, and I can't talk about any of it. I come out of like, the secret tiny extra dimensional space that I have to slip into to watch these things to prepare for Ready Room. And I'll come out and Anne will see the look on my face and she'll be like, what happened in Star Trek? I'll be like, I can't tell you. And I really wish that I could talk about it. And she's like, I don't watch any of it. So you could tell me 100% of it and I wouldn't understand any of it at all. And I'm like, yeah, I know, but I can't take a chance that you inadvertently drop into conversation. Remember that time Stacey Abrams was,
Exactly. Oh my goodness. Yeah, no. I had one more question for you because I know we're running out of time a little bit.
Okay.
The beginning of your book resonated with me a lot. The introductions where you speak about leaving the warts and all in the beginning, and leaving that in and having accountability for that. I grew up on social media. So for me, it's not just it's things that it's not just things that I've said, it's things that I've posted, it's things that are still on the internet that people can look at. For you, it's what was in your book. And so I wondered if you had any advice for people my age, who grew up using computers and being in that digital world, who may need to take accountability for things that they've done in the past, but who also need to leave room for themselves to listen and grow and learn as a person.
That is a lovely question, and I really appreciate you giving me an opportunity to speak on it. It's something that I've thought about. I gave my manuscript to a friend of mine who is in their 30s, and I said, I know how 40s people are going to react to this, but I just don't know how it's going to land on your generation. Would you just read this and let me know what you think? And they said, my really honest, like, I love you thing is, don't publish this. Like, this is not great. Leave it behind. Like, I look at things that I wrote when I was like trying to be a young, edgelord, and I'm mortified by it. And like, I was able to delete a lot of my stuff. And I was like, okay, I really appreciate that. But that's not an option. Like, contracts are signed, things are happening. Like, I can't not do it. But I thought about that impulse, and I thought about what it meant that I was really vulnerably and honestly just exposing parts of myself that I find embarrassing or regretful, or in some cases even shameful. And I realized that as I look back at those things, the fact that I find these certain choices I made regretful or embarrassing or gross shows that I've grown and changed since then. And that's wonderful. And that is super important, and it's super okay. Here's the thing. None of us who say and do regrettable, childish things when we're young are special and different. Everybody does it. Everybody does it. Everybody says a hurtful thing. Everybody says a hurtful thing they know is hurtful to be hurtful, because they haven't yet learned not to do that. That's part of growing as a person. When you grow up in public, things that would have happened in front of a few kids on a playground now happen in front of the internet. You're gonna say and do things that you regret. As long as you start from a place, and this is like, just as parents have to do this with kids. You start kids in a place where just like hating people is not okay. That's not what we do. Othering people is not okay. That's not what we do. Dehumanizing people is not okay. That's not what we do. Those are just parts of the values, right? You're still going to do things that you find regretful. You're still going to say things that are hurtful, and you're going to be bummed about it. How you choose to take responsibility for those things once you become aware of them is not for me to say, but it's important. Find a way to do it. Make amends if you can, and acknowledge that you've learned from it. And this is especially to younger people. Please be patient with people as they are growing and learning. Please be patient and gracious to people. And I know that a lot of the time a younger person will say that this is tone policing, and that's not what I mean at all. What I mean is, I know what tone policing is, and it's a way to shut down discussion, and that's not what I'm talking about. What I'm saying is, please, when someone is going through this process, because you're all going to have to do it, because your entire lives are online. It's just not possible to get rid of it. You're all going to have to do it. In our future is an election campaign where someone loses an election because of some dumb fucking 4chan thing they did when they were 14 years old. Like, that's going to happen. Somebody's going to lose an election because of a thing they retweeted on Twitter one time. If they retweeted the thing on Twitter 10 times, okay, guess what? That's a pattern. But like one time, 2 times, okay, well, I haven't learned things yet. Please be patient and gentle with people who are realizing, oh no, oh God, right? That includes within. That includes being patient and gentle with yourself. As I did the audiobook for Still Just a Geek, and I was saying the things that were written down by like 25-year-old me, I was like, oh my God, I just need to sit this kid down, and I put a piece of tape on his mouth and make him listen to me. Like, I was just like, this kid is the worst. And I was like, that kid was me. And then I was like, wait a minute, that kid was me. That kid was trauma survivor, an abuse survivor, living with undiagnosed mental illness, struggling all over the place, completely unsupported except by his wife in every way that mattered. And I found compassion and empathy for that person who I was. And my entire tone changed. I went from like, what the hell, man, to, oh, buddy, I know what you think you're doing, but I'm going to tell you why it's not going to work and why you're going to regret this in 20 years. And I think having that type of compassion toward ourselves at every step of our lives is extremely important. And the sooner you can find that level of compassion and patience with yourself, the sooner you can get to a place of experiencing and promoting like growth as a human being.
Well, Will, just wanted to say, yeah, that was great. I could listen to you all day.
Same.
I know we all could. So, Will, before we start closing up, again, want to be respectful of your time.
This was the moment that Jay's computer blue screened on him.
I think he meant to say respectful of your time.
Yes,
and,
I think he did. And then he
was going to ask if you had anything else that you wanted to plug, and if you wanted to broadcast any of your socials. They're obviously already more visible than we are, but we're happy to help where we can.
You're very kind. I would just love to remind everybody that I do host the Ready Room, and I love it, and I'm really grateful to do it. I do my very, very best to bring my fellow fans into the room where it happens as someone who used to be in the room where it happens, and bring those two things together to present a unique look into what it means to be part of making Star Trek come to life right now. I love it. I'm super grateful for it. It is part of my career that I absolutely cherish. So you can see me on the Ready Room every Thursday. Online, I exist at willwheaton.net. And on social media, I post to Facebook and to Instagram, where I am It's Will Wheaton in both places. I don't really have anything else to promote at the moment. I mean, I've got really awesome stuff coming up, but it's all stuff that I'm not allowed to talk about.
Understandable.
I will just say that if you follow me in those places, you'll get to see the things as they come around. And to anyone who's sat through an hour of me, thank you for giving me your time. I really appreciate you listening to me and just giving me an opportunity to have my voice and thoughts heard. And to everyone who chooses to spend time with my book, I'm really grateful for that. I sincerely hope you get out of it what I really hope, what I think I put into it.
Absolutely. And by the time this goes out, I just wanted to say I will see you in Chicago. That will be my first TrekCon.
It's going to be a lot. Wear very comfortable shoes and stay hydrated. Those are my two pieces of advice for you.
Thank you
also,
very much.
you're gonna miss things. You're not going to be able to do everything. So pick one thing each day that you absolutely cannot miss and prioritize it, and then make sub lists, right? in diminishing order of I cannot live without this.
Just to be sure, what day and what panels are you on?
I still don't know.
Yeah, we don't know. We don't know.
A buddy of mine lives in Chicago, and he texted me this morning. He was like, "Hey, we're gonna hang out when I'm in town." So he was like, "So what night do you want to do this? What's your schedule like?" And he's like, "It's only 2 weeks away." And I was like, "Wait, what do you mean it's only 2 weeks away? Hold on, 2 weeks away sounds a lot closer than April 8th. Like that? What?" So there's that whole thing that I'm dealing with. And then the other thing is that I generally don't know what my panels and things are until a couple of days before, but they'll all be published online. And as always, I'll be talking about them on social media.
Sorry, I dropped there my computer blue screen, which is, Will, why do you and I have trouble with technology every time we talk?
I think it's because when you get two people with chicken legs like you and I have in the same place at the same time, it creates a bit of a technological singularity that just creates an interference field.
Or it's the dice curse. It's bleeding into real life.
And of course, it is, of course, amplified by the dice curse.
I had to mention that. I'm sorry, I had to mention the dice curse.
It's quite all right. It is a thing that happens. But I'm glad you're back. I'm glad you're back to say goodbye.
Yeah, I just wanted to call you to let you know I don't have time to talk to you.
I get it. I appreciate it. I don't have time either. I've been working for the last hour. I gotta go.
Right.
Will, going back to being respectful of your time, thank you so much. If you wanted to hang out with us longer, we'd happily have you, but we want to be respectful of your time. So thanks so much for being here.
Dinner's not going to make itself, so I got to go do that.
Right.
But thank you. Thank you very much. Suzanne, I'll see you in Chicago.
Absolutely.
This was
Or
great.
I guess by the time this comes out, I will have seen you in Chicago. Let's just
time
stop and think
travel.
about all the weird temporal shit we're doing right now. That's fun. That's why I love science fiction. I hope that you all stay safe and stay healthy. Please be kind, be honest, be honorable. Always do your very best and don't be a dick.
Oh, that was perfect. I mean, that's a perfect closer right there.
To the audience, thanks for always going boldly with Beyond Trek Podcast.
Live long and
hand.
prosper.
Hey everybody, I just wanted to give a quick shout out to our Patreon and Anchor supporters. Big thanks to Stephanie Baker, S. Tam, Anne Marie, Jim Cook, and Nora Hickson. We really appreciate your support. Thanks for being a part of Beyond Trek Podcast.
We are Beyond Trek Podcast. Lower your inhibitions and surrender your years. We will add inspirational and hilarious Trek content to your day. Your attention will adapt to subscribe to us. Resistance is futile.